Well, I know a lot of people who are part of this community, even if you don't live in the area, but you uh, uh, follow online. What we have in common is a lot of us are very traumatized by what is happening in the world. We care about undocumented people. We care about um, LGBTQ members of our community. We care about Muslims. We care about Jewish people. We care about um, our full human family. And at a time of such political scapegoating, where there's always somebody being picked out to be bullied, um, the teaching we have today is very problematic. We're going through the Sermon on the Mount, and we've hit a very hard teaching for our time, and that is that we are to love our enemies. Now, we understand that passage enough to feel really guilty. Uh, we realize we're supposed to love everybody, but we turn on the news and we see how abusive things are. We see that many people we care about are essentially being hunted and used as political scapegoats and footballs. And so we don't feel very loving, and at times we feel very guilty for the kind of trauma that happens in our heart. In this particular community, um, it may be a little different than many of the churches around, in that the most problematic person for most of the people that I know in my circle of friends is the president, the most difficult person to find that love and the affection for and the compassion for. Um, and as much as we may want to do that, almost every time we pick up a newspaper or read the news, we hear something hateful being done. The statement this week that I found staggering was the president is already beginning to run for election, and he said of his opponent something that I don't think 5 years ago would have been even possible to be considered to be an acceptable statement. The president said of his opponent, he's going to do things that nobody ever would think even possible because he's following the radical left agenda. Now, so far, that's just an opinion, and that's okay. But here's what he says is going to happen. He's take away your guns, destroy your Second Amendment, no religion, no anything, hurt the Bible, hurt God. He's against God. He's against guns. Now, if we went back 10 years ago and somebody running for any office at any level in the United States said that his or her opponent was going to hurt God and hurt the Bible, I think the person would have been laughed out of office. But things have gotten so bad and so traumatized that this kind of cruelty and ignorance is something happening every day. And what happens is our hearts get wounded, and we turn on the television set or we pick up a paper, and the trauma is right there at the surface, so that when we see the image of that person, we feel not very loving. So what we're going to ask the question, and if you're on the other side of the political aisle, please feel free to do that translation. But how do we love somebody who's being abusive to us, or somebody who's being abusive to people we care about? Immigrants, people of other faiths, women, LGBTQ. The list goes on and on. And I think for this to be a practical teaching, something that we can take into our lives, we have to understand that this section of the Sermon on the Mount is a series of exaggerations. It's setting the bar so high that nobody can reach it. Nobody can be loving all the time. You're not able Loving your enemy is a contradiction in terms. If somebody's your enemy, you don't love them, by definition. So we're going to have to unpack this, but to realize the poetry that Jesus is using is one of exaggeration right now. And what I think he's trying to do is show us what the pole star is. You cannot be loving all the time because you're a biological being. At the same time, I think what Jesus is saying is not telling us what we need to do. He's telling us who we are. He's saying that underneath all of that pain, all of that trauma, that you are a loving being by your nature. He said, you are the light of the world. Your consciousness feels interwoven with others. We care by nature. But what happens is we get hurt, we get burned, we get traumatized, we see other people being abused, and we can't feel that. We can't feel that compassion. And Jesus is going to say that even in an eclipse, the sun is still there. Even though you cannot feel compassion, that is still there somewhere deep, deep in your heart. He's not telling you always need to feel that, you always need to do that. He's saying that light is always there within you. That compassion is always there to return to, even if it takes years to heal and find that again. So when Jesus says love, it's a kind of special definition that he's doing. When he talks about enemies, he's not saying it's wrong to ever feel trauma. You can't help it that if somebody has traumatized you, your emotions flare up when that person walks into the room. That's not hatred. Hatred is a kind of a commitment to work for another person's harm or to not work for their well-being. So the commitment that's here is towards another person's well-being. It doesn't mean you always like that person. It means that you're always willing and working for their human rights. When I got into ministry, I think many, many people get into ministry with the false belief that this is going to make you likable to everybody. That you're going to be just a wise old clergy, and everybody's going to, basically like you, kind of a teddy bear kind of thing. And what you realize is that if you're going to love people the way Jesus loved them, then your love has to include justice, which is going to make other people very angry at you. And so what Jesus taught is if you do it the right way, you're always going to have people that don't like you. I'll never forget, one day I started a web page of my own, and I kept getting these ugly, ugly messages. And I did a little research and to try to find out, where this is coming from. It seemed like this collection of people really didn't like me. And I found it was the same web address, whatever the little set of numbers. There was one person that had set up web pages against me and was sending, making comments all the time, but it was the same person. Somehow I hurt the person, I scared the person, I did something that made that person obsess on me. I think what Jesus is saying is it's not possible to love somebody who you hate. That would be a contradiction in terms. But by enemy, I think he's talking about the people that hate us. That it's possible to love somebody even if they don't love you back. And I think that's maybe the bridge that Jesus is trying to build there. That we have to heal any hatred we have for others. We feel it as a wound. If I cannot love you, that's a wound in me. And I'm only human, that's going to happen. But I can heal from that. And also, I can not let my own light get shut down because somebody else is in misery and is feeling hateful or vengeful. We have that wisdom when we think ecologically, that we understand that we don't like sharks in our swimming pool. We don't want an alligator in our swimming pool. But there's a place in the universe for sharks and alligators. We have to set up a system where they can't eat us. At the same time, we don't have to demonize them. right? To make ourselves safe, to protect other people. So um, Jesus isn't saying that we have to like everybody, but we do have to will their good, their benefit. Jesus repeatedly says in the teachings that you are the light of the world. And I think he's maybe saying that in a way that's literally true. Human consciousness shines out of the depths of the universe, that we are this incredible fireworks display of the universe. And the times that we're happiest in life are when we're loving and compassionate. If you'll just go back and scan the times when you were in bliss, they weren't times of bitterness and obsessing on somebody else's evil. If we think of that, if we realize that our happiest times are times that we are loving, then we realize Jesus isn't trying to put this guilt trip on us that we're always supposed to have these feelings that we don't have. It's saying we can always return to our own happiness, to our own balance. And part of that happiness is feeling the interconnectedness of everything. And when there's any part of the web of life that we fundamentally cannot feel compassion for, it shuts down, it puts an eclipse in our own heart. So we have sort of a twin obligation. One is to deal injustice, to protect ourselves and other people from the abuse of others, but also to try to heal that person and ourselves by living in compassion. That statement, as I say, Jesus is exaggerating. When he says, be perfect as your heavenly parent is perfect, obviously that's not possible. But by perfect, the word that he's using there is one that means mature. It's a seed that has become the plant that it was intended to be. That if you are the light of the world, then being honest and scientific and being artistic and compassionate, working for justice, all of those things are a part of your nature. So Jesus isn't putting a burden on us. He's helping to reveal what's in our heart. To be perfect then does not mean to be like a little angel. It means to be fully human. And part of humanity is to stumble, to have relationships get broken and then try to heal them again. But our lives are too short to heal all of the relationships. So what's being said here is that we're part of a deeper unity. And even if we can't figure out how to do it in our own lives, we can keep our own light shining and not get it shut down because somebody else is hateful or abusive. Mark Sandlin was writing some thoughts, and I think it fits in here. He says, hate is so consuming. It consumes our thoughts. It consumes our hearts. It consumes our emotions. It consumes our happiness. It consumes our lives. And I think when we obsess in bitterness, in pain, and hold on to that pain, it can eclipse all the joy that we have in living. So Jesus said that we're like little versions of whatever the source is. He said, be like your heavenly parent. You're a little expression of this larger cosmic event. And Jesus says that God's love is like the sun. It doesn't come on and off due to what's happening on the other end. That the sun shines on the just and the unjust. It rains on the just and the unjust. So what he's saying, I think, is not letting our compassion get shut down. At the same time, they're saying not to let our joy get cut down, our peace of mind. That as long as our wisdom is contingent on other people, then the most foolish person in the room can shut down our wisdom. And as long as our compassion is contingent on how other people react to us, then the most wounded person in the room can shut down our compassion. So what Jesus is, I think, teaching us to do is to turn that love into an eternal flame that's there inside. It doesn't mean that we don't lose touch with it. It doesn't mean that we don't lose balance and do our tantrums and all that kind of thing. But it's saying that after all of that is said and done, there is that light to return to underneath all of the storms and confusion. So Jesus repeatedly says, you are the light of the world. I think if we think about the most joyful times in our lives, those are the times when we've been at peace and felt interconnected with other people. So what Jesus is saying when he says, love your enemies, is to not let somebody else's fear extinguish your hope. To not let somebody else's cruelty eclipse your compassion. We can't always feel love for other people. But the love Jesus is talking about is not a feeling. It's a commitment to the common good, to the expression of who we most deeply are, that light shining out of the darkness. We can't always do it right, but what Jesus is saying is we can always return to that. After we've made the worst mistakes possible, that light is always there inside of us. Don't let anyone else's darkness eclipse your light. He's not telling us what to do. He's telling us who we are. So I invite you now to your own reflection on these words.